There are moments we wish we could step back into, words left unsaid, calls never made, goodbyes that live only in our minds. This is If I Could Say One More Thing, a space where real people share unfinished conversations, private longings, and the stories that still echo in their hearts. Here, each story is told with care because some truths are fragile and some endings are not really endings at all. Today's story belongs to someone who found a message he didn't know he was carrying. A 33-second voicemail from his father. Small, hesitant, and late in arriving. In this moment between memory and regret, we follow the quiet space between a son who needed more and a father who didn't know how to give it. This is The Call I Finally Returned. There's a certain sound a phone makes when it lands at the bottom of a drawer, flat, final. I buried mine once, a few winters ago, not out of rage, just weariness. You can't really ghost a father, but you can lose touch by increments. A missed call here, a holiday card unsigned. Then one day you're suddenly a grown man with an unreturned message sitting somewhere between your thumb and your conscience. That's where I found it. A voicemail nestled inside an iCloud backup I hadn't touched since the pandemic. December 22nd, 2019, 6:43 p.m. The name on the screen, Dad. At first I thought it might have been a pocket dial. We hadn't spoken in years, not properly. There had been a time when we had, in that awkward, obligatory way men sometimes do, like passing tools back and forth in a garage, grunts, nods, and silences thicker than oil. But somewhere along the line, even that effort dried up. I pressed play. Hey, Charles, or Charlie, I suppose. Just wanted to say Happy Christmas. You're probably busy, or maybe you're not. Maybe I shouldn't have called, but I did. I'm around. Same number. That's all. Take care. That's all. Just 33 seconds of someone fumbling with a map he didn't know how to read. The thing that startled me, what struck the deepest chord, was the pause before Charlie. He never called me that. I was always Charles, formal, efficient, like a tax form. But that day he tried. It was subtle, but unmistakable. A small rebellion, a father remembering his son as a boy and not just the man who walked away. The truth is, I didn't walk away all at once. It wasn't a slammed door or a final fight with broken plates and shouted names. It was a slow erosion. I used to think he was the tallest man in the world. Well, not literally. He was maybe 5'9" on a good day, with socks on. But as a boy, I saw him the way children often see their fathers, a fortress. Solid, impenetrable, permanent. He built things with his hands, shelving units, coke hooks, even a half-hearted stab at a garden shed that wobbled when it rained. He was better with drills than with words. Affection came in practical shapes. A packed lunch, a warm car engine on a cold morning, an oil change done without being asked. But tenderness? That was trickier. Once, when I was 8, I fell off my bike and cut my knee open. I remember crying, not from the pain, but because he just stood there, unsure. He handed me a flannel and said, "Well, that'll teach you to break sooner." Later, I found out he had stayed up paging through an old first aid booklet we kept in a biscuit tin, trying to determine whether butterfly stitches or plasters were the proper solution. That was the shape of his love. Slanted, quiet, sometimes indecipherable. My mother left when I was 12. I think it broke something in both of us. Just not the same thing. He hardened, and I folded inward. I used to lie awake at night, listening for him. He had this slow, uneven shuffle when he moved around the flat, like a man reluctant to disturb the silence he lived in. After Mum left, the air between us grew thick with things neither of us knew how to name. I was angry but also terrified. Terrified that if I leaned into him, he might disappear too. So I became the child who always managed. I did my homework without a word. Made toast for tea when he forgot, again. Though at the time, I thought he didn't care. Only now do I wonder if he simply didn't know how to be both father and lonely man at once. I thought, if I could just be low maintenance enough, maybe he wouldn't leave me too. Of course, he never did. But I also don't think he ever really saw how scared I was, and I never told him. He cooked on Sundays. Bacon, eggs, black pudding, all of it. A full English. Never said a word over breakfast. He'd nod at the kettle. I'd fill it. That was our conversation. He never once told me he was proud. Not after I passed my exams, not when I got my first job, not when I moved to Italy to teach English, or when I published my first article. Not even when I came out, especially not then. Right. Well, that's up to you then. That's what he said, word for word. I was 24. I had waited my whole life for him to see me, but when I finally stood in front of him, fully formed and trembling with honesty, he looked through me. What I wanted in that moment wasn't a speech, just a pause, a look, some small flicker of recognition. But he blinked right past me, like I was a stranger with familiar shoes. That's when something in me changed. I had always known he didn't have the emotional vocabulary I needed, but up until then, I had believed he might try to learn it. When he didn't, I started translating that silence as rejection. It took me years to realize it might have just been fear. So I stopped trying. The years that followed were polite, but hollow. Like we were miming a relationship neither of us believed in. A birthday card arrived each year, signed in his stiff handwriting. Best Dad. No message, no memory. Just proof he had remembered the date, but not the person. And then there were the texts, always short, always late. A 2-word one on Boxing Day. You good? I never knew if it meant, are you okay? Or I've done my part. Either way, I'd stare at it longer than I'd admit. I kept a spreadsheet in my head of who reached out first, how long it had been, how little he asked. I became very good at keeping score. A master accountant of emotional labor. I wore my resentment like armor, even though it weighed more than it protected. And then I got the message, and I didn't call him back. Here's the thing. I've spent years defending my silence. I've said it was necessary, mature, a way to keep boundaries. But truthfully, it was easier than being disappointed again. It was easier than hearing him say something clumsy or defensive or worse, nothing at all. And maybe he felt the same. I used to think love meant always being there, knowing the right thing to say. But now I wonder if it's also this, fumbling a voicemail and sending it anyway, even when you know it might echo forever. He died last year, alone. A neighbor found him slumped in his armchair, telly still glowing, a cup of tea gone cold at his side. I hadn't seen him in nearly 5 years. No final words, no bedside reconciliation, just the muffled ring of a phone that was never answered. And now, all I have is this, a message, a voice, a moment I can replay but never rewrite. Some days I still argue with myself about it. Was it my job to call him? To forgive first, to open the door? But other days, I understand that healing isn't linear, that we don't get there by being right. We get there by being honest. And here's my honesty. I loved my father, and I needed more from him. And both of those things can be true at the same time. I think sometimes about what it would have been like if I had called him. I imagine he would pick up, his voice, older, slower. Hello? Hey, Dad, it's me. A long pause, and then, Charlie? And I'd say, yeah, I got your message. Just wanted to say thank you and Happy Christmas. He'd clear his throat like he's about to say something big. Glad you called, he'd say. Me too. And maybe before the call ended, I'd say one more thing. Something I never had the nerve to say as a boy. Dad, I was always watching. And I know you're trying, even if I didn't know how to see it then. And maybe he'd say, so was I. And maybe we'd both forgive ourselves for not being perfect. And maybe that would be enough. The story you've just heard is based on real events. All names have been changed for privacy, but the emotions remain exactly as they were lived. In the conversation ahead, I speak with the person behind this story. A chance to understand what it means to love someone who could not meet you in the middle, and to carry both gratitude and grief in the same hand. I imagine it might have felt strange hearing a version of yourself called Charles. When you first read the story we wrote together, what stood out to you the most?
The moment where he says Charlie, that bit caught me off guard. Even though that's not my name, it's not what my dad ever called me either, but somehow it still landed. It made me think, if he'd ever softened, maybe that's what he'd have said. It felt like the version of me he might have reached for if he'd known how. And I suppose that's what this story gave me. Space to imagine the version of us that could have existed. I didn't expect to feel so seen by a fictional version of myself, but I did.
So let's talk about that voicemail. Do you remember what it felt like, hearing his voice after so long? Were you expecting it to affect you the way it did?
Yeah, vividly. I was sat on the edge of my bed, sorting out old files on an ancient backup. I hadn't even realised it had synced voicemails. When I saw Dad, I thought it was an old missed call. Then I heard his voice. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't sound upset or emotional, but it hit like a brick. He sounded unsure. Like he didn't quite believe he had the right to be calling. It was one of those moments where everything stops. You forget what you were doing, forget the room you're in. I listened to it 3 times before I could breathe properly.
Now, I know this might be a hard one, but I'm curious. Why didn't you call him back? I mean, what was going through your head at the time?
Fear, mostly. And pride, though I wouldn't have admitted that back then. I told myself I was setting boundaries, but really I was scared. I didn't want to open the door only to have it shut again. I thought, I've worked so hard to get okay without him. What if one call undoes all that? There's this particular kind of hurt that only comes from silence you've already survived once. I didn't want to go through that again. So I chose the safer kind of silence. And it haunts me more than I thought it would.
Looking back now, do you think your dad understood what you needed from him? I mean, not just as a son, but as a person coming into his own?
No, I don't think he did. But I also never made it easy to explain. I didn't know how to ask without sounding needy or dramatic. I wanted warmth, softness, just a bit of vulnerability. But I think he came from a world where those things were luxuries, not requirements. And when you're a kid, you think if someone isn't giving you what you need, it means they're withholding it on purpose. It took me years to see that he wasn't punishing me. He was just emotionally illiterate. But by the time I understood that, the damage had already set in.
When you hear that message now, what do you think he was really trying to say? Not the words, but underneath them.
I think he was saying, I miss you, but couldn't quite get the words out. That message was clumsy, half mumbled, and full of hesitations. But under all that, I could hear it. It was the kind of call you make when you've rehearsed it 20 times in your head and still get it wrong when it counts. He wasn't great with feelings, never was. But I know what it cost someone like him just to hit call. It wasn't some grand gesture. It was 33 seconds of someone swallowing their pride. And maybe that was his way of showing me he hadn't stopped caring. Not fully. I didn't hear it properly at the time. I only heard the awkwardness. But now I hear the effort. And in some ways that's louder than anything he ever said to my face.
Was requesting this story, letting me tell it on your own behalf, was that a kind of forgiveness for you? Or maybe, I don't know, maybe just a way to let go of something you'd been carrying for a long time?
It was a turning point, yeah. Having it be written, or more accurately, letting you write it, let me look at things I'd been avoiding. I don't think forgiveness always means wiping the slate clean. In this case, it meant saying, yes, it hurt, but I'm not going to carry this weight forever. I'd held on to a version of him that only included the harm. This helped me remember the moments that didn't hurt. I don't excuse the things he couldn't give me. But I don't need to punish him in my memory either. That's as close to peace as I think I'll get.
Is there a memory of him, something small, not dramatic, that stayed with you? You know, one of those ordinary moments that keeps resurfacing when you least expect it?
Yeah. He once tried to fix the boiler during a cold snap and made a proper hash of it. No heat for 2 days. I was about 14, I think. He brought the camping stove into the kitchen, lit some candles, and made tea in his old metal kettle. Didn't say anything. Just slid a mug toward me like it was some secret gesture. At the time, I thought it was pathetic. I was cold, angry, probably hormonal. But now I look back and think, that was him trying to take care of me in the only way he knew how.
If someone listening right now has a message they've never answered or a conversation they've put off for years, what would you say to them? What helped you shift from silence to speaking?
Don't wait for perfect timing or perfect words. Just speak, write, record something, whisper it to the wind if you have to. Because silence can feel safe, but it steals things. Your voice matters.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's shaky, even if it's late, say what you need to say. Not for them, for you. So you can sleep without wondering what might have changed had you tried.
Do you feel like you've returned this call now in your own way? I mean, not the literal one, but the emotional one, I suppose.
I do, yeah. Letting this story be told, hearing it read aloud, it felt like my way of calling back. Not in real time, not over the phone, but in a way that mattered to me. It was like finally whispering into the silence and hearing something shift. I don't need him to answer. I just needed to say something back.
I always find this word tricky, but how do you feel about forgiveness these days? Has your idea of it changed over time?
It's not neat.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a ribbon you tie on pain, but it is necessary. Forgiveness, for me, meant loosening the grip the past had on me. It's letting the story sit somewhere softer. I'm not sure I've forgiven everything, but I've forgiven enough to stop flinching every time I think of him, and that's something.
All right, last one, the one I always ask. If you could say one more thing to your dad, just one, what would it be?
I think I'd say, I see it now. Not everything, but enough. I see the effort, beneath the silence, the love beneath the awkwardness. I see that you stayed, even when you didn't know how to be there, and I think part of me was always waiting for you to show up in a way that felt familiar. But you were showing up, just in a language I didn't understand back then. So I'd say, thank you. And maybe I'd just sit beside you and not say anything else. Because you and I were always better at sitting than speaking. And maybe this time that would be enough.
Some messages we return. Others we carry quietly for the rest of our lives. If today's story touched something in you, I hope you'll follow this podcast so you don't miss the next time we step into the space between what was said and what still lingers. I'm Andrea Applewick, and this is If I Could Say One More Thing.